Now, I want to touch on something that you brought up the last time you were on The Informer, and you touched on corruption in the lower courts and family courts within Australia. But you did say that you had faith in the High Court of Australia. So I wanted to know where the difference comes in. What do you see wrong with the judiciary in the lower courts as compared to the higher courts?
There are so many problems in this country. It's so hard to list them all, but the Family Court of Australia, there has been many reports and many investigations and inquiries. The Australian Law Reform Commission made a review on the Family Court of Australia, and it advised for the abolishment of the court. Now, that's a huge advice to come from the Australian Law Reform Commission. They want it to be abolished, okay? And the reason why they didn't go too much into that, but they did talk about a real failure of process. They called it a failure of process. But I take it a step further. This is a failure of morality. I'm very happy to talk publicly and say that the family court judges are some of the most ruthless people I have met. I am now under attack by the family court and by the family court judges for speaking out in relation to family violence, in relation to the treatment of women in confiscating their children where they are not a risk, for forcing women into economic turmoil by enabling the perpetrators and enabling, I mean, in many cases, enabling the perpetrator father. I know it happens in inversely in other cases, but the cases I deal with is obviously violence issues, family violence issues and sexual abuse issues. The police, even when you reach out to them and they want to help you initially, they get thwarted by the family courts to stop the assistance of women. So what ends up happening is in this nation, women are fleeing for their safety with no support. So I have women that I'm taking care of for their safety. Me, as a woman, I have to take care of the safety of other women where men, let's say, threaten. In this particular case, the man called me up himself and said a group of men are going to come smash and stab her if she doesn't pull her head in. And he made complete lies about her. We went and reported that to the police, the Victorian police, all the way up to the assistant commissioners, all the way up to the inspectors. And they said this to me: it's my fault. I'm to blame. I'm to blame for taking the call. I'm to blame for everything, apparently. The family court judges restrained me from representing her and said to me that I'm a risk to the child when I've never been around the child. And they're completely protecting this man. The judges are protecting him. Independent children lawyers are protecting him. The police are protecting him. And I'm all by myself. I'm also worried for my safety from this man.
But why are they doing this? What do they have to gain by protecting the perpetrators?
The perpetrators they protect usually are very wealthy or have money, and they throw money at the system to legitimize and keep them in their positions.
So this isn't happening in the cases of lower socioeconomic sort of...
No, it's happening as well in there. And then I will say the other reasons are this, that these people are filthy. These people enjoy power tripping. These people are actually enjoy hurting women and hurting children. There's so many of them, I can't even tell you where to start and where to end. I am completely shocked by this. This truly shocks me to my core. What I ended up discovering, and I've got this other case at the moment to tell you, and I'm happy to speak publicly about it because the case is public. I'm representing a grandmother in Queensland where the Australian Federal Police, and this is a message to the Australian Federal Police, where the Attorney Generals, where the Commonwealth of Australia are hunting down this woman and prosecuting her because her grandchild, she wanted to protect from potential abuse that was occurring to him that he disclosed to the police of potentially his father abusing him. And he
sexually or both?
Sexually.
Right.
And these disclosures were made, okay, to the police. And now the police have charged her with conspiracy to defeat justice. The Family Court of Australia took the grandchild away from her and put him with the father. And now the Australian Federal Police and the Department of Public Prosecutions are prosecuting her. For the last 2 years, she's had a band on her ankle, so to monitor where she goes and where she comes. She's a grandmother who was scared for her child. And this is what this country has become.
And is this systemic within the family court, or is this a matter of a few bad apples in a bunch of...
No, this is a deep crisis of our police force, of child protection units in the police force. The kind of individuals that become and occupy these places are very dark people. I hate to use the word dark, because dark is not a bad thing. Just troubled, brutal, deeply corrupt. And then when you have systems that facilitate and allow and enable, I mean, I'm going from one officer to another, from one from one judge to another, from one person to another, and it's like I'm dealing with the same individual. They all have hatred, vengeance, vindictiveness, and they just want to cause pain. And they want to enable and help and assist the perpetrators. I'm flabbergasted. I can't even tell you how overwhelmed I am.
Is this sort of corruption happening in the magistrates and the county courts as well, or is it just in the family court?
It's in the Family Court of Australia. It is in the magistrates' court, not so much in the county court, not so much in the Supreme Courts, and not so much in the higher courts like the federal court that is not the family court. There is a lot more classier space. They're classier spaces that have a little bit more rules and have more processes. What's happened with the Family Court of Australia, it's become a cocoon. They built a cocoon over themselves and created a sense of privilege and entitlement. And they're all kind of helping each other make money and feed off the misery of people. Okay, that's how they make their money, by feeding off the misery of people. If I was a Chief Justice, and this is Chief Justice Ulstergren, I blew the whistle and I said to him, I'm a whistleblower. You have to treat me as a whistleblower, because your judges have gone off their heads. I mean, they are off their heads. They want me to go and pay for the father. They want me to pay personally his costs. I mean, it's shocking. I can't even...
On what grounds?
On grounds that I lack objectivity. That's why.
But if you were representing the grandmother, is that not meant to be that you have her best interests at heart and you do everything to protect her as your client?
Yeah, but they restrain me even from representing her. I mean, it is extremely corrupt. I have never seen anything in my life like this. And she hasn't even looked at the evidence. The evidence is there, that there is a recording which clearly states the father was ringing me. I didn't ring him, he rang me up. Okay, and he's saying she's going to certain places and doing things and completely lying about her, which is what we know in Middle Eastern and ethnic cultures, that's called honor killing. When you start shaming women in the community and saying to the men in the community, let's go and stab and bash her and smash her because she's a dishonorable woman, okay, all based on lies. These are very serious allegations. I mean, this still makes me very scared today. Even though the evidence is all there, it's all my fault, apparently.
This particular case, is that their background in terms of their religious belief? Yes. So that's okay.
But even though that's the background, the Australian courts are supporting the ethnic father. Okay, so there is, this idea that women are protected in this country is a lie. It's a lie. Women are not protected in this country. Children are not protected in this country. We need to get with the plan, okay? There is a lot of risk for vulnerable women in our community. Indigenous vulnerable women are targeted by police. They are targeted. okay? They are targeted by child protection agencies. Ethnic vulnerable women, women who are poorer in Australian communities, they are targeted by our establishments. That's the reality.
So is there anything being done about this corruption, anything that you're doing or that somebody else or another group is doing to expose it, to stop it?
Every time something is attempted, the government thwarts it, okay, and protects the perpetrators, even though the Australian Law Reform Commission, a government body, okay, has said that the Family Court of Australia should be abolished. The previous Chief Justice said there should be a royal commission into the Family Court of Australia, and nothing happens. Even those voices are coming from the top.
How long ago were those directives given?
Say that again, my dear.
How long ago were those directives given to?
They won't get. There was only last year, okay, that the Australian Law Reform
and
Commission.
No steps have been taken.
No steps have been taken. In fact, it's just reinforced the nastiness and the absolute corruption of these judges, okay? And I'm so happy to come, I mean, let them come and sue me for defamation. I know what I'm saying is correct. I could prove how corrupt they are. So I'm so confident in saying that. I've got hundreds of women who are on my side. So I'll tell you what I'm doing. I'm going to be launching a People's Commission, not a Royal Commission, but a People's Commission. One that is open for people to come to me and share with me their troubles and information so that I know exactly who are the perpetrators, so that we get right to the bottom of who is causing pain in the bureaucracy of this nation to other people. Okay, I need to name them first. I need to get the data and the information. I've already collated hundreds of documents against these individuals. I want thousands of documents against these individuals. So we will be doing a Royal Commission. Then we're going to do a Section 72 Parliamentary Commission complaint to remove these corrupt judges, to show and demonstrate that our Parliament needs to intervene when the judiciary are out of control. Okay, that's just out of control behaviour. They've got no Evidence Act that they follow. They've got discretionary powers that are completely disproportionate. They can remove children, restrain mothers from seeing their children, restrain fathers from seeing their children without any evidence. They've got powers to have a trial without a jury. Okay, completely unconstitutional right to its core. Okay, and I'll plan on doing the second step. And the third step is High Court challenges. These mothers are desperate for their children back. What is the state and the government doing in interfering in the right of mothers to hold their children, to raise their children? It's an outrage. Okay, this idea that we live in a democratic society is entirely flawed right to its core. You know, it's because people don't see, you know, when you have money and you're kind of plodding along, not thinking of your environment, you can't see, so you don't believe. But for those who've been impacted and touched by these bureaucrats, these filthy bureaucrats, now you speak to them and you see that these people, many people have killed themselves and no one has documented why. A young lady, another organization came out and did the Abby's report, Abby's project, where a young girl who was handed over to her father and she was raped by him for years, she killed herself. This is here in this country. This is not in Afghanistan. This is here. This is happening. Murder and blood on these people's hand is here. So let them not go and cast their opinion on what they think of other cultures, because this culture is the brutal culture.
So I want to touch on two things really quickly before we finish up. There were laws passed back in February that I think it's just a Victorian law that basically gags victims of sexual assault from talking about their experiences. And then there is now talk that there could possibly be a new gag law imposed which would stop victims from being named at all. So it doesn't just stop them from talking about their own story, but it would stop them from doing interviews, writing autobiographies, their families naming them. And we're talking about people like Jill Meagher. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on that before we wrap up.
This is exactly the sort of manifestation of these troubled minds and these filthy minds that are actually making decisions to that point. You should not have any laws that muzzle the freedom of speech of people, particularly when they need to talk about their trauma. Particularly,
do they not need to protect victims though?
Yeah, they need to protect victims. Of course, what I'm saying is that these laws are muzzling the victim from actually being able to speak, you know, from having a voice, from being able to communicate about what has happened to them, you know, and this is just but a continuation of the problems that I was talking about before. You know, protection of the enablers, protection of their rights, protection of their freedoms at the cost of the desecration and the belittling of the rights of the victim.
So the second one that I talked about obviously hasn't passed yet, the gag law about people's names being mentioned in the press or anything. And if that is passed, it means news articles would be taken down from news sites, books would be taken off the shelves, all of that. Do you think that is something that will make it through the Victorian Parliament?
I think there's going to be huge problems with that law passing, to be honest. Again, this is another type of PSYOP operation like the Section 200A omnibus bill. You know, we're going to try to push people right to their brink, you know, right to the edge of collapse. And we're going to see how much we can push on people to protect perpetrators. I mean, these acts that are passing, they're all about enabling perpetrators to continue to do what they're doing. Okay, and this is fundamentally the problem. You know, when you've got barristers and other people out there who are blindly labor, let's say, and they can't see the forest from the trees because they're too consumed by the cult thinking. You know, I'm going to subscribe to the cult thinking. They're not actually looking at what is actually happening before them, and what is happening is the degradation of the rights of victims and the enabling of the rights of perpetrators, because there's a lot of bureaucrats that are perpetrators. So they're making laws to protect themselves. Okay, that's the driving force behind it. Okay, because there's too many perpetrators who are in key decisions at the top. And that's why my People's Commission is going to try and get to the bottom of these people. Enough is enough. You can't keep going and brutalizing everyone in your path and scaring them off from actually pursuing you. You know, that's why we don't hear a lot of those voices, because they're crushed. Not because they can't speak. It's because they're completely crushed. They've either killed themselves, they become mentally ill, they become completely marginalized by society. There's too many people like that in our society. We can't keep closing our eyes to the trauma, because otherwise we're all going to be traumatized.
Well, Serene, all I can say is whether people agree with you or disagree with you, you are a force to be reckoned with. It has been wonderful speaking with you. Thank you for joining us again on The Informer. Serena Teffaha.